Hi, Gary Stearman. I have a few comments on Bible study. You know, in its basic doctrines, the Bible is very straightforward, very easy to understand. The verses concerning salvation, the Romans road to salvation, for example, in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, and so forth. Leading someone to Christ through a relatively elementary Bible study is something that the Bible is very, very good at. But I have to tell you this, after years of Bible study, the Bible is also very complex and at its deeper levels, very easily misunderstood and lately mischaracterized. And I'm going to refer here to Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse, in which the disciples of Jesus gathered with him. And as they gathered there on the Mount of Olives, they asked him, "Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?" They were interested, as we are, in knowing when this whole thing is going to come to an end. And Jesus then preached. He taught in the most amazing way in what has since come to be called the Olivet Discourse. And recently I heard it said, and with great force it was said, that Jesus didn't say that there would be a great tribulation that would last 7 years. And I want to show you just how wrong that is. When Jesus spoke to the disciples there on the Mount of Olives, he spoke to them about the beginning of sorrows, that is, birth pangs. He talked about their affliction. He talked about false prophets arising. He talked about iniquity abounding, that's lawlessness. And then in verse 15 of Matthew 24, he said, "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand." Well, we read, we believe we understand. When Jesus referred to Daniel the prophet, he was referring to something that we can look up in our Bible, Daniel chapter 9, and we see this: 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression. So we have a 70-week countdown, and there have been literally hundreds of books written about the 70 weeks of Daniel, and particularly about the 70th week. And that 70th week occurs in Daniel 9:27. "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease." And so Daniel lays out this basic prophecy, but let me tell you what, this prophecy is aimed directly at Israel, because it begins by saying 70 weeks are determined upon thy people, that's the Jews, the 12 tribes, and upon thy holy city, that's Jerusalem. It's not Chicago, not New York, not Oklahoma City, it's Jerusalem. And this 70-week period will make an end of sins. In other words, a period of, if you will, social, religious, economic ferment over the ages, finally brought to a conclusion in the tribulation. And to that individual who has said, Jesus never said there would be a great tribulation, if you just continue on down the page in Matthew 24 to verse 21, Jesus said, "For then," that is when you see this abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, Jesus says, "For then shall be great tribulation." And he says it. He actually uses the term, "such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be." The Great Tribulation is not going to be a few earthquakes, a few tornadoes, maybe some hurricanes. It's going to be unlike anything since the flood, because Jesus places the Great Tribulation in the context of everything that's happened on the face of this world since the beginning of the world to this time. That would include the flood of Noah. Well, if I go back to Isaiah chapter 24, where Isaiah describes the great tribulation, he says in verse 1, "Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and he maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof." That's pretty serious. And then if you move on down in Isaiah 24 to verse 19, it says, "The earth is utterly broken down. The earth is clean dissolved. The earth is moved exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, shall be removed like a cottage. The transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall punish the host of the high ones that are on high." And we read about that battle in the book of Revelation. But going back to Matthew 24, let me read again. Matthew 24:21, "For then shall be great tribulation." In fact, if you read it in the Greek, it says the tribulation, the great one, signifying that it would be the one, the only tribulation. And then if you move down to verse 29, again in Matthew 24, you read this: "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light." And of course, after that, the sign of the Son of Man appears in the heavens, and he returns in the second coming. And the point I want to make is, yes, indeed, Jesus did mention the Great Tribulation specifically. And for those of you who have heard someone say, "Well, Jesus never talked about these things, didn't even talk about the Great Tribulation." Well, yes, he did. And when he did, he spoke of it in the context of Israel. In fact, he was speaking to his disciples who were Israelites. He was speaking from the Mount of Olives, and he was speaking about the things that would be happening in Judea. It's a very specific prophecy, very specific to Israel, not to us who are Gentiles who have salvation through the finished work of the Lord Jesus Christ. I want to tell you that the study of Bible prophecy is complicated. It has to be built very carefully, because you cannot go to a single verse anywhere and develop a prophetic profile. You have to interlace and interlock and cross-reference, and you have to look at the times, the seasons. You have to look at when something was written, to whom it was said. You have to look at the context. You have to fit various disparate ideas together to come up with a meaningful prophetic position. A lot of people skip all those steps and go right to what they want to say. If they don't want there to be a great tribulation, well, they'll say Jesus never said there was a great tribulation. Oh, yes, he did. Read Matthew 24:21. I'm going to continue this discussion days to come, because there are a lot of people who are taking verses out of context these days and shouting from the rooftops that we who believe in the pre-millennial, pre-tribulational prophetic viewpoint, the dispensational prophetic viewpoint, are dead wrong. I'm here to tell you that our position is built on the work of men over the past century and a half. Great men of the Bible, great scholars who've studied the languages, who've studied and prayed, and men who've been involved in missionary movements, men who have been involved in great pastorates, their teaching resulting in the salvation of literally thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. We're not talking about a fly-by-night teaching of a certain sort of Bible prophecy. We're talking about a systematic Bible prophecy, premillennial, pre-tribulational, dispensational, and that's our position, and it will continue to be our position right here at Prophecy Watchers. So join us day after day as we open the Word, study the Bible, and share with you. I'm Gary Stearman. Hope you're having a great day, and by the way, keep watching, everybody. We are Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter, or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.